A nurse saves a man with no name, going against orders and rules. Soon after, she is unfairly demoted, and 2 days later, Air Force One lands in her city to find her. What follows is a story of secrets, surveillance, and an honor the world will never know about. But it changed everything. Before you hear this exciting story, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss more stories like this. Let's begin. Midnight had settled over the hospital like a damp blanket. The wall clock ticked with a tired little click, and the fluorescent lights hummed with that low purr you only hear when the hallway is empty. Sofía, a nurse for 9 years, with a surgeon's precision for triage and a reputation for never losing her cool, not even in a fire, was checking the emergency cart for the 3rd time. Adrenaline for fluids, cannulas, bandages. Routine was her way of praying. At 12:17 a.m., the automatic doors at emergency side open, and a strange wind came in, like a storm far away. A faded yellow taxi stopped in front of the ramp. The driver didn't turn off the engine. He honked twice, nervous. Sofía felt, more than thought, that something was about to break. She grabbed gloves, pushed the stretcher, and went outside. The scene was small, yet different. A man in his 50s, a week's beard, dark jacket soaked with sweat, was holding his right side with both hands. No gushing blood, but the fabric was stiff with a dry stain. She helped the taxi driver get him out of the seat. Solid weight, metallic smell, short, sharp breaths. "Sir, can you hear me? I'm Sofía. We're going inside," she said with that steady voice that calms strangers. Inside, she placed him under the lamp and opened his jacket. A deep bruise under his floating rib. The kind of hit you get from a steering wheel or a body. No ID, no wallet, no phone. The man whispered a single word, more breath than sound. "No police." Sofía brought the oxygen mask closer without arguing. She had learned that between a secret and a rapid heartbeat, the urgent one comes first. As she set up in 4, she noticed something. A watch strap with tiny scratches like magnesium marks, and on the inside of his wrist, a pale band where another strap used to be. Not a homeless man, not a drunk. His hands had the calluses of someone who doesn't write reports but opens heavy doors. When she pressed his abdomen, he shut his eyes with a disciplined, almost military gesture. Inhale through the nose, hold, exhale in 4 counts. Raul, the on-call resident, arrived with his stale coffee mood. "Name?" "He hasn't said." "Sure he's not with the police?" The taxi driver said he picked him up near the river. Raul wanted to call security. Sofía stopped him with a look. "First, pain relief and an ultrasound. His pulse is racing, and his oxygen is down to 92. It wasn't rebellion, it was the unwritten rule. Care first, questions later." Raul grumbled, but agreed. On the ultrasound screen, a shadow appeared where it shouldn't be. Possible internal bleeding. While preparing to move him to X-ray, Sofía saw the man search for her eyes, as if he needed to anchor himself. "You're going to be okay," she promised, not knowing that those words, said so many times, would cost her more than sleep this time. The desk phone rang once, twice, 3 times, insistent. The receptionist picked up with a face that said, "You don't pay me enough for this," listened, and went pale. "They're asking about an unidentified man who just came in. They won't say who they are. They sound official." Raul shrugged. "Then let them in." Sofía held his arm. "Not yet. Give me 5 minutes." She didn't know why she asked for time, but she did. In those 5 minutes, she wrapped a compression bandage, adjusted the oxygen, and started warm fluids. The man, half conscious, repeated, "No names." 2 hospital security guards came in. Behind them, 2 men in suits, not from this city, not from this budget. Private airport looks, silent shoes. "We're looking for a man," one began. Sofía answered with textbook calm. "Protocol. We stabilize first, then identify. Any questions can wait until the patient is out of danger. The man in the suit studied her like someone checking a lock. He didn't insist. He wrote something down. They left. At 1:03 a.m., Sofía pushed the stretcher toward X-ray with Raoul beside her. The door closed like the lid of a book. Silence filled the room. The image showed a rib fracture and a shadow confirming what she feared. Fluid where it shouldn't be. Or after lab results. Carefully, the man gripped the sheet, a Morse code with his knuckles. Sofía placed her hand over his light. "I'm here." He nodded slightly, eyes still closed. Back in the ward, the hallway had changed. 2 more security guards, and the receptionist typing like her keyboard was a military radio. They called again. "They say authorities are coming." Raoul sighed. "We're going to get a 20-page report out of this." Sofía didn't answer. She was listening to the ceiling fan, the 4-pump, and that other engine. The human body when it wants to keep going. Someone had arrived without a name. And sometimes the nameless bring storms with them. In her final nursing note, she wrote in her neat hand, "Male patient and hemodynamically unstable at admission. Stabilization prioritized. External requests for information deferred until further evaluation." She put away her pen, looked at the man. She didn't know his name, but she knew one thing. She had made a decision. And decisions, on nights like this, don't stay in the hospital. Dawn had barely painted the hospital windows gray when Sofía finished giving her report to the surgical team. The night shift never forgives, but this one had felt like 3. Dr. Herrera, the shift chief, appeared in the hallway with his spotless coat and a steaming coffee in hand. His brow was tight, like someone carrying a clear order. "Sofía, what's this I hear about an unidentified patient with outside surveillance?" he asked, straight to the point. 55-year-old man, possible hemothorax. "No ID, no family," she answered in a neutral tone. "They're requesting his immediate transfer to another facility. He's not stable. If we move him now, we'll kill him." Herrera took a sip, as if deciding in that drink whether or not to fight. Finally, he clicked his tongue. "Look, I'll back you up, but if higher-ups give the order, I won't cover for you." It was the first crack in the protection she thought she had. A chill ran through Sofía. Not fear, but anticipation. She knew that from that moment on, every decision would be a tug-of-war between medical duty and the demands coming from outside. In the operating room, while the surgeons worked inside the chest cavity, Sofía managed every monitor, every adjustment to the ventilator. The man sedated, breathed with the rhythm of the machine, but his vital signs slowly climbed, as if he refused to give in. Through the interior window, she saw the 2 men in suits pass by again. One was on a satellite phone. The other scanned the room like a guard. They weren't police. At least, not in uniform. "Who the hell is this guy?" Raoul whispered as he set up a second 4-line. "Someone worth taking a risk for," Sofía replied without looking up. By mid-morning, the procedure ended successfully. Drain in place, bleeding controlled. The man was still unconscious but stable. Herrera came over. "We have orders to hand the patient over to an external team as soon as he wakes. I can't stop this anymore. Then I'll be the one to receive him, not someone else," Sofía said. Hours later, when the patient opened his eyes, he didn't seem confused. More like a soldier scanning the room after returning from the field. "Where am I?" he asked in a rough voice. "In a safe place," she answered. "There's no safe place," he murmured, then closed his eyes again. That moment was the point of no return. Sofía knew, as surely as she knew the sun would rise, that her role was no longer just nurse. She was going to protect him, even if it meant burning her bridges. At noon, Human Resources called her in to sign a consent document for the patient's transfer. She didn't sign. That refusal, simple on the surface, would be the first nail sealing the coffin of her career. Outside the hospital, rumors spread. Taxi drivers, orderlies, and admin staff whispered about a strange guy brought in by a cab, and men with foreign accents. Inside, the atmosphere was a tightened rope. Sofía closed the curtain around his bed, sat beside him, and took his pulse. "You're going to get out of here," she told him. "You don't understand. If they take me, I'm not coming back," he whispered, calm, not afraid, just certain. She looked at him for a moment, and there she made the decision that would change her life. She wouldn't hand him over. Not like this. Not to them. The hospital, which until the day before had been a sanctuary of predictable routines, now felt like a chessboard where every piece moved under invisible orders. Sofía noticed it in the hallways. Conversations that stopped when she appeared, glances exchanged over her head, and a heavy silence that only breaks when someone feels watched. News of the mystery patient had spread faster than any surgical report. In the cafeteria, 2 aides whispered, "They say he's a spy." "No, he's a government fugitive." She walked past them without turning her head. She had learned from her father, a retired sailor, that looking too much at those who make up stories is giving them permission to keep going. By mid-morning, she was called to the medical director's office. At the table sat a man she had never seen before. Light gray suit, discreet blue tie, leather folder. He didn't introduce himself. He simply opened the folder and began to read. "Nurse Sofía Lopez, admission of an unidentified male patient on the 14th at 0:17 hours. You were in charge of the initial triage for line and transfer to the operating room. Do you confirm?" "Yes." "Why didn't you immediately notify the authorities that there were outside personnel requesting access to the patient?" "Because he was unstable, and my priority was to save his life." The man looked up for a second, like someone testing the strength of a wall before hitting it. "Do you know you're breaking protocol?" "I know I'm keeping the oath I took when I put on this coat." The meeting lasted less than 10 minutes, but it left a weight in her chest that deep breaths couldn't ease. As she stepped out, she found Raoul pretending to review a file in the hallway. "They're watching you, Sofía," he said quietly. "I know." In the recovery area, the patient, whom some were already calling NN as if it were a nickname, looked for her with his eyes every time she came in. Between checking vitals and adjusting his he dropped short phrases, like breadcrumbs leading down an invisible path. "Don't open the door unless it's me. If they ask, I wasn't here. Look under the mattress." Tempted to follow the last instruction, Sofía waited until the shift change. When she finally lifted the foam, she found a piece of paper folded so many times it felt like a pill. Inside, a sequence of numbers and letters with no explanation. She slipped it into her pocket, feeling like she now carried a key without knowing what it opened. The security camera seemed to always be aimed at her section. A new guard, young, with one ear glued to his earpiece, passed by every 20 minutes pretending to check fire extinguishers. Doctors who used to smile at her now gave only a small chin nod. The hospital, her second home, was turning into a hostile maze. By the end of the day, management notified her that she was suspended from accessing certain areas as a precaution. She could no longer enter the report room or the administrative zone. They were pushing her to the edges of her own territory. When she stepped into the inner courtyard for air, she felt the change immediately. It wasn't paranoia. The surveillance was no longer subtle. 2 men in suits, the same from the first night, were sitting on a bench pretending to read the newspaper. One looked up and gave a slight nod. It wasn't a greeting, it was a reminder. Sofía went back to the patient's room with one goal: buy time. She knew the clock wasn't on her side, and the weight of every stare was pushing her toward an inevitable breaking point. The morning was cold, with a sky almost metallic gray, As if it were a warning, Sofía arrived at the hospital before her shift, hoping for a few minutes of calm with a lukewarm coffee from the hallway machine. She didn't get them. Before she could take the first sip, the head nurse, Marta, appeared with an envelope in her hand and a tense expression. "Sofía, we need to talk. Now." In the meeting room, the air smelled of old paper and disinfectant. Marta placed the envelope on the table and pushed it toward her. "It's official. Starting today, you're reassigned to administrative duties in the supply warehouse. No access to patients, medical records, or restricted areas." Sofía opened the envelope and read words that felt carved with a blade. "Due to exceptional circumstances and for internal security reasons, you are temporarily removed from clinical duties." There was no room for reply. The signature at the bottom wasn't from the medical director, but from an interinstitutional committee whose seal she didn't recognize. "This isn't temporary," Sofía said, her voice steadier than she expected. Marta lowered her gaze. "Sofía, there's nothing I can do. They told me not to argue, just to give it to you." The hallway seemed longer than usual as she walked back to her locker. Inside, her white uniform hung like a flag she could no longer fly. As she folded her coat, she felt they were taking away not just a job, but the identity she had built over years. By mid-morning, she passed by the room where NN was. The guard at the door crossed his arms. "You're not authorized to enter. He's my patient." "Not anymore." The man in the gray suit, the same from the earlier interrogation, appeared behind the guard. "Sofía, let us do our job. You've already done your part." She stepped forward, holding his gaze. "I'm not finished." But the door didn't open. She turned on her heels and walked down the hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. In her pocket, the paper with the code NN had given her burned like a hot stone. The rest of the day was a silent procession between boxes of gloves, bottles of alcohol, and syringe orders. The active nursing floor was far away, separated by walls and by an invisible abyss. From her new station, she could see, through a small window, the courtyard where the men in suits spoke with uniformed officers. There was no doubt. Whatever was happening with that patient was far bigger than the hospital. That night, as she left, she found a white envelope under her car's windshield wiper. Inside was just a handwritten note. "If you want answers, don't walk away. They will come for him, and for you." Sofía put the note in the same pocket as the code. Now she carried two pieces of a puzzle she didn't know how to solve, but she knew she couldn't ignore them. The hospital was no longer the only place where the tension could be felt. Outside, in the city streets, there was a strange murmur, like an echo that repeated but never fully reached the ear. Sofía noticed it the same afternoon. She decided to go to her usual bakery. As she walked in, the customer's conversation stopped, and the baker, who had greeted her by name for years, only nodded with a tight smile. "Did you hear about the hospital?" She caught someone whispering as she left. "Better not talk about that," another voice replied. That "better not talk about it" started following her everywhere. At the pharmacy, the corner store, even at the bus stop. It was as if everyone knew something, but no one was willing to risk putting it into words. 2 days after her demotion, Sofía tried to access the hospital's internal system from her personal laptop. The file for patient NN no longer existed. It wasn't locked, it wasn't classified, it was simply gone. As if he had never been admitted. The hole in the database felt colder than any threat, a complete erasure. She called Raúl, the resident, to test the waters. "Raúl, is he still admitted?" Silence on the other end. Then a sigh. "I can't talk about that, Sofía. They're checking my calls. Just tell me if he's alive. Don't call me again." He hung up before she could insist. On the local radio, a short news segment mentioned a medical incident under investigation at San Gabriel Hospital. No names, no details, but the dry way it was read reminded her of military statements. Just enough to close the topic. She decided to walk to the neighborhood where the taxi driver had picked up NN, hoping for a lead. It was a half-empty industrial area, with shuttered warehouses and a dark canal that smelled of rust. She asked a private guard if he'd seen anything that night. Without lifting his eyes from his phone, the man only said, "Ma'am, nothing happened here." That phrase, repeated by different mouths, was becoming an impenetrable wall. It wasn't denial, it was fear. By nightfall, back at her apartment, she found another envelope under the door. Inside, a black and white photo. Her, in the hospital hallway, pushing NN's stretcher toward X-ray. On the back, only 2 words, "Too late." Sofía dropped onto the couch, the photo in her hands. Outside, the distant rumble of a heavy engine passed down the street. It wasn't any regular truck. It had the deep sound of a jet engine starting up. She thought about what she'd read the night before on a closed forum. A U.S. presidential plane would be flying over the region on an undisclosed mission. Something was about to move, and she knew, even if everyone else stayed silent, that she was still on the board. 2 days after her demotion, dawn brought an unusual silence, as if the city had decided to hold its breath. The wind was still, the neighborhood dogs didn't bark, and even the traffic seemed slower. Sofía felt it in her bones before she saw it. A deep, heavy rumble that wasn't from a commercial plane. She stepped out onto the balcony just as a blue and white shadow crossed the sky at low altitude. The golden letters United States of America shone in the sun. Air Force One. She recognized it instantly, not from seeing it in person before, but from news footage and documentaries. A plane like that didn't appear in her city without a serious reason. The roar lingered for several seconds, as if the sound wanted to settle into every corner of the collective memory. From the street, she saw neighbors looking up, some recording with their phones, others simply watching in silence. There was no excitement or curiosity. There was tension. Minutes later, the rumor was confirmed. A statement from the local airport announced the unscheduled arrival of a high-level diplomatic delegation. They didn't mention the president, but everyone knew that aircraft didn't carry just anyone. Sofía turned on the TV. Every channel was showing footage from the runway. Black vehicles with tinted windows lined up by the stairway, agents in dark glasses and flawless suits, and the unmistakable Secret Service badge on their lapels. Among them were men who didn't belong to the usual political circle of the region. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She answered. "Sofía, don't say your name or mine." The voice was deep, urgent. "The man you treated. They've been looking for him long before he reached your hospital. He's not a criminal. Don't hang up. Who is he? All I can tell you is, if they take him today, you'll never get the chance to see him again. He's at the airbase, not the hospital." The line went dead. The code she had been carrying in her pocket since that night started to burn against her skin. What if it was a way to find him? Or a password to something bigger? By mid-morning, the city was locked down with checkpoints. Army vehicles blocked the roads, helicopters flew over the downtown, and social media was filled with photos of convoys heading toward the military zone. Sofía understood she was in a race against a clock she couldn't see, and that the roar of Air Force One wasn't just a casual arrival. It was the countdown to an ending she couldn't stop. The phone in the small supply room rang at 10:14 a.m., cutting through the monotony of checking boxes of gloves and masks. No one ever called there except to request materials. But this time, the voice on the other end didn't ask for anything. "Main waiting room. Now, just you." There was no greeting, no name. The line went dead before she could answer. Sofía felt the world narrow to a hallway, a target, and a quickening heartbeat. She left her blue coat on the rack and walked with measured steps toward the hospital's waiting area. The room was almost empty. In one corner, Two men in dark suits pretended to read magazines. Near the door, a woman with mirrored sunglasses and an earpiece hidden in her ear spoke on the phone. But her attention was fixed on Sofía. In the center of the room, sitting upright in a sporty jacket that looked borrowed, was him. And his skin was paler than the night he arrived, but his eyes were just as sharp, as if every movement in the room was data to store. "I thought they had," she began. "No time," he cut in, urgency and relief in his voice. "Listen to me. What you found under the mattress is an access key. Don't use it unless I disappear." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Who are you, really? Someone who knows too much and shouldn't be here anymore." Sofía swallowed hard. "Why did you come to this hospital?" "I didn't choose to come. They left me here because they trusted someone like you would do what you did." Before she could process his words, one of the men in suits stepped forward. "Time!" NN stood up slowly, but before turning away he took her hand. In her palm, he left something small and cold. A USB drive wrapped in black tape. "Don't open it here," he whispered. "And if you hear it was a voluntary transfer, don't believe it." They escorted him toward the exit, joined by 3 more people who had appeared out of nowhere. Outside, the deep roar of an engine started up. Sofía felt a knot in her stomach. It wasn't a regular vehicle, but the same heavy sound she had heard when Air Force One flew over the city. She stood in the waiting room, the USB in her pocket, certain that whatever the truth was, there wasn't much time left to uncover it. That night, the hospital faded behind Sofía like a distant shadow. She walked aimlessly through streets she knew, but now they felt narrower, as if the city itself understood she was carrying something far too big for her pocket. The USB drive, wrapped in its black tape, felt heavier than a lead stethoscope. At home, she sat in front of her laptop. She hesitated. She remembered NN's words. "Don't use it unless I disappear." He was gone now, and the roar of the engine when they took him had been final. She inserted the device. The screen filled with folders with code names, classified documents, and short videos showing places she recognized from the news, and others she had never seen before. Reports of covert operations, protected identities, and among them, a file titled Priority Medical. She opened it. It was a report written in English and Spanish, with official seals. The patient known as NN sustained injuries during a high-risk international mission. Immediate medical intervention saved his life, preventing a major diplomatic crisis. The attending nurse acted with professionalism and exemplary judgment, prioritizing medical care over external pressures. Sofía read that last sentence 3 times. It wasn't public recognition. It wasn't meant for the press or a ceremony. It was an internal document for the eyes of a handful of people who operated in the shadows. But there it was, her name, tied to the difference between a life and a catastrophe. The rest of the file detailed that, for reasons of national security, her involvement would never be made public, and that officially she would remain demoted. There would be no medal, no headline, no speech. Only that invisible acknowledgement, stored on a server that perhaps no one would ever open again. She closed the laptop and pressed her forehead into her hands. She didn't know whether to feel betrayed or grateful. Outside, a plane crossed the night sky. She couldn't see it, but the sound reminded her that somewhere he was still alive because of her. 2 days later, she received an unmarked envelope. Inside was a small card, embossed with a Secret Service crest and a single handwritten line. "In times of silence, actions speak louder." "Thank you." Sofía smiled. It wasn't the kind of recognition she could hang on a wall, but it was one she could carry in her heart. And she understood something. Sometimes honor isn't measured in applause or rank, but in the quiet certainty of having done the right thing when no one was watching, and in knowing that, even if the story is never told, someone, somewhere, will remember your name. She placed the card next to the USB drive, in a metal box under her bed. Not out of fear, but out of respect for what it represented. Then she took the white uniform she had left hanging days earlier and folded it carefully, like a standard kept for the next battle. Because even if the world had demoted her, she knew she was still what she had always been, a nurse. And no one could take that away from her. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell, and give a like so you won't miss more stories like this one. See you next time!